If you have been racing on Zwift for any length of time, you have probably experienced the dreaded signal cutout, when your power meter or speed sensor very briefly loses connection with Zwift, completely destroying the race that you're doing. It always seems to happen at the worst possible time. You're in a breakaway, you're in the front pack up a climb, you're surging off the front. It almost like it knows. It's almost like it knows exactly when the worst possible time to lose power for even just a split second. Because what happens is Zwift registers a 0 and pretty much brings you to a dead stop. So you can be going 30 miles an hour off the front, power cuts out, and boom, your race is basically over. Now, there's a ton of suggestions online about ways to try to improve this. And I have, on my own personal setup, done pretty much all of these. I have an ANT Plus dongle plugged into a powered USB port. I use a USB 3.0 extension cable, so it's got better shielding. And I've got the dongle as close as possible to the power source. And yet, I still have issues with this. At least once or twice a week, I'll have power cut out. But there was a really interesting Zwift Insider article that was posted, a few weeks ago. And in their test, they found that placing the ANT Plus sensor as close as possible to the power source was actually one of the worst for signal dropouts. And that's really interesting, because you would think the closer you are to the source, the better the signal. But that was not what they found. And since that's how I have mine set up, I thought we would take a look at where we could place the device to see if we can get better signal, see if we can't replicate the results from the Zwift Insider article. Let's get into it. So here's how I have my Zwift set up. Yeah, that's right. I've got the computer directly behind me underneath the TV and plugged into the motherboard on the USB 3.0 port. You don't really need 3.0 speeds, but it's just the newest standard, so it's what I use. I've got a 3.0 extension cable that runs out from behind the computer and then taped down directly underneath the bike, terminating directly beneath, actually a little bit behind the bottom bracket. So we're probably about 6 or 7 inches away from the bottom bracket. Really, the only way I could get it closer is if I taped the sensor directly to the frame. Actually, that's a good idea. Okay, we're gonna add that to the list of testing. We're gonna try to tape the sensor directly to the frame and see if it makes a difference. My original thought, and this is what most people think, is with the sensor this close to the power meter, like I said, I have a power meter in the bottom bracket, it should be as good as possible. But that's not what this Zwift Insider article found. And actually, that kind of makes sense. Because if we think about the people who make these power meters and trainers and everything, the signal antenna, they know that most people are going to connect them to their head unit up here at the front of the bike. So when they design these units, they might be putting the Bluetooth and ANT Plus antenna pointing up and forward to try to get the signal from here up to the front of the bike. So if I have my sensor down and back, that's the opposite direction of where the signal might be strongest. So moving the sensor forward and potentially up, that might not be the worst idea ever. That might actually be a really great way to improve signal quality. Let's test it out. So this is how we're going to do it. I've got everything set up as it would be normally. This is my control. I'm going to do 10 minutes on Zwift under these conditions. So the sensor, exactly where you saw it before, sort of behind the bottom bracket. Then I'm going to move the sensor to directly behind the front wheel, another 10 minutes. Then in front of the front wheel, 10 minutes. And finally, we're going to tape it to the down tube. Kind of like if you were to draw a straight line between the bottom bracket and the Garmin head unit. If the signal's traveling in that direction, we're going to try to intercept it and get the best possible signal. And then afterwards, each time I'm going to analyze the log files using the Zwift Analyzer. It's the exact same thing that they used in the Zwift Insider article. Let's get started. Whew. I actually get sweaty doing these tests. All right, 15 minutes later, I think we have some good results. Let me get cleaned up and we'll look at the data. So let's talk about the results. And there are definitely some things to talk about. Starting things off with the control point, basically just a sensor exactly where it was before, directly under, well, a little bit behind the bottom bracket, had a signal failure rate of about 10.26%, which actually not terrible. Then moving it forward to directly behind the front wheel, we improved to 8.85%. Then going even further and moving it in front of the wheel, we had 11.12%. So getting a little bit worse the further away we go. Then finally, position 3, taping the Amp Plus sensor to the actual down tube, didn't actually do too bad. It was 9.2%. So the results are in line with what Zwift Insider found, which is that placing the sensor directly behind the front wheel actually did have the best result. And it was better than where I had it currently, which was behind the bottom bracket. However, that's not the end of the story. Afterwards, after I had done all these tests, I actually just, I had a workout for today, so about 2 hours on the bike. So I just did my 2-hour ride. Again, with the tax antenna turned off and the sensor at position 1. And during that ride, about 2 hours, I got a failure rate of 9.78%, which seems really good. That's the lowest of the day. Well, one of the lowest of the day over the course of 2 hours. That seems like a really great result. However, even though it was less than 10%, I lost connection with Zwift, with my power meter, 3 times during my workout. So it seems like even though the signal looks good, it's not quite good enough, which is interesting. Now, there is one other thing that we can try to do here. So again, referencing back to that Zwift Insider article, they found that the Garmin Amp Plus dongle was actually rather poor performing as compared to, I believe it was an Ansel dongle. So I've gone ahead and ordered one of the new Ansel Ant Plus dongles. Should be here in a few days, and we will rerun the tests with that and see if we can finally eliminate the Zwift dropouts, because Zwift Racing League is coming, and I can't have the power meter cutting out all the time in those races. So check back next week, because hopefully the sensor will be here by then. Should be here by then. Amazon Prime and all, you know. So be able to redo the test and see if we finally get a good result. Bye.